Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It has been a little while between chats, but I'm really interested in getting back into podcasting regularly. So if you are here listening to this episode about Bali, I would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts for future episodes, things you would like me to talk about, from feeding kids, which obviously is my professional specialty, to any other topics that you would like me to discuss. So today we are talking about my most recent family trip to Bali. I'm sitting in a freezing cold Perth winter day today and really wishing that I was back in tropical paradise. My electric blanket on just to get the real Bali vibes. So today I'm building on a couple of episodes that I have previously recorded. So in 2024, I took my family and we went with another group of friends to Bali. I talk a little bit in those two episodes about where we stayed, what sorts of things we do, why we were there. So you can absolutely go back and link to those on the Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla podcast show page. I will kind of just give you a little bit of context as to kind of what we've done with our holidays and why this year was different. This year, I took my 7-year-old, 4-year-old, my husband, and we travelled with another family. We went to Nusa Dua to another all-inclusive hotel called the Grand Mirage Hotel. We booked it online, and I think particularly with these all-inclusive hotels, you have to wait for some kind of deal. So we were kind of scouring the luxury escapes and the Tripper deal, and we ended up booking through Travel Online to secure a significant reduction on the actual kind of ruck rates of an all-inclusive hotel. For those of you who've listened to me talk about this before, you'll know, but basically the type of holiday I'm looking for as a tired working parent of 2 children is one of absolute ease. I do not want to be adventuring. I don't want to be making decisions. I don't want to be packing snacks. I don't want to be thinking about anything. And that is why we choose to go to Bali really regularly. I appreciate there is a little bit of a misconception, or maybe it's a true conception, about kind of people who regularly go to Bali. I love it. I think it's really a wonderful place to take a family. From Perth, it takes us 3.5 hours to fly there. It's a different country, different food, much cheaper, and the weather, obviously, during an Australian winter, traveling to somewhere like Bali is just such a nice break. This time we flew again from Perth. We are very lucky to have a range of flight options. We flew on the 7 a.m. flight this time, which we were at the pool by 12:15 on the same day. So huge benefit for a family. We definitely had to get up early. We're at the airport by 5, and I can't fault that. We had to be ready the night before. I think that's really helpful for me because my husband likes to leave things to the last minute. And when you have to be able to get up, get your clothes on and get in the car, you cannot be like, oh, we'll just do that in the morning. So I particularly like an early morning flight for that reason. We took our own food to the airport. We bought a coffee, but I took a packet of pancakes and some little jam and cream and butter in takeaway containers. I wanted to have a lunchbox with us in case we needed it to put food in on the way home, but realistically, we didn't. I loved the timing. My kids had snacks, looked out the window, watched an iPad on the way over, and I actually read part of a book. So this was the first time, I think, this new age bracket of kids, me being more comfortable with them just watching a screen when we're on the way on a plane, was just a game changer. I enjoyed the flight. We got to Bali. We had done all of our visa work online. So we had done all of the visa and customs declarations online, which took a long time for a family of 4. You have to take photos of your passports, take photos of yourself. You have to upload everything. It probably took us a couple of hours each family to do. It was very quick The process was actually quite quick at the airport, but the queue was still reasonably long in the family line. So if you have a child under the age of 6, you have to be processed in a different line anyway. Sometimes that can be shorter, sometimes it can be longer. It was helpful that we didn't have to faff around with our passports because everything had been lodged online. But I'm in two minds as to whether I would bother doing all that ahead of time again. We then were picked up by a very large van which took both families and all of our luggage to the Grand Mirage, and that was a great start. I was very excited. We booked the Grand Mirage because the hotel that we stayed in last year, Melia, has been closed for renovations. We loved Melia and would have stayed there again in a heartbeat, but it was closed, so we had to look elsewhere. It took us a while to decide where we were going to stay, and the reason that we chose Grand Mirage was a lot of it based on kind of the social media hype. A lot of influencers who stayed there who reported really great things. Their social media game is very strong compared to a lot of other Bali hotels. Their reputation is really great. They've recently installed a lazy river that we're quite keen on. So yeah, we booked that. It is quite expensive. When we looked at, I can probably think about some actual numbers, but we booked a package deal including kind of the room and the all-inclusive. So that included all food and drinks for all of us in the stay. But this was not a cheap holiday, just kind of prefacing this. So let me talk about the hotel. When we got there are two parts to the hotel. One is the family side, one's the like more traditional side. We didn't know where we were. We were in the family side, which I think actually worked. What happened is the Grand Mirage was a bigger hotel and there was a smaller hotel next door. From my understanding, they bought the smaller hotel and have included it into a mega kind of complex. So there are like 2 receptions, 2 kind of main pool areas, 2, lots of everything. The great thing about the family side was that we had a room that slept 4. So there were kind of 2 bedrooms and actually 2 bathrooms, which, I mean, having a family in just one room is a lot. So having kind of 2 bathrooms was really helpful. The girls slept in a bunk bed, kind of a built-in bunk bed. The door kind of has a sliding door just between our room and their room. So it meant that it could be very dark. I did love that. It was very dark, so they could sleep until they naturally woke up as opposed to light streaming in the windows. The rooms were a little bit tired. They had kind of cute sayings on the wall, but a lot of the letters had kind of dropped off. Overall, they were quite nice. They were spacious rooms. The bath was a very big step into, and that was probably more of an issue for the adults in the room trying to get in and out of the shower that was above the bath. But otherwise, I really couldn't fault the room. We stayed on the ground floor, which I would highly, highly recommend. We had an exit into the main hallway, but also out onto kind of the main deck, which led towards the pool. Our friends were across the way from us, which meant it was really easy to signal to each other as to when we were, ready to go for food. From a room point of view, I think that was great. I loved the pool areas at this hotel. So 2 main pool areas, one in the kids area, which was kind of a bigger pool with a reasonably large water slide. My 4-year-old was too scared to go down that slide, but my 7-year-old went maybe 355 times, so that was worth it. There was a very shallow area as well, which I've talked about in my previous podcast. I just love that there's a section that the kids can play in while you are sitting on a sun lounger watching them without them kind of being out in the deep, so they could play around in that shallow area. That was really good. The other pool, the main pool on the Grand Mirage side of the hotel, was beautiful. Really large, old style Bali pool, a bridge going over one part of it, a really deep section, a section for volleyball, a section for water aerobics, again another shallow part that you could watch them from. Really a beautifully designed pool. There was also a splash park on the family side, so that was a smaller pool that had 3 small slides that you could go down, a tipping bucket, lots of kind of splashy fountain things that the kids could play around in, knee-deep water. Again, something you could kind of sit and watch if you didn't want to be part of it. My kids spent hours on that, and that's actually something they spent a lot of time with the nanny because she could supervise them all in a smaller space, and I felt that they were safe in that area. Loved that splash park, and that was something very different that was not at a hotel we've been to before. And in fact, we didn't go to Waterbomb Park this time, even though I love Waterbomb Park. There was just no need. The type of slides that we had were exactly what the kids wanted. There was no queues. There was always somebody, a lifeguard available, and it was a really easy and fun thing for them to use. So the rooms were pretty good. The doors were fun. And the pools and the slides were amazing. The things I just didn't love, and I suspect that all of this is going to come back to how much I loved our previous hotel and how much this didn't live up to it. I just feel like the hotel, the Grand Mirage, is marketed so well that it just doesn't live up to the expectation or the hype. So we paid for an all-inclusive package, but there were still several things that we had to pay for. If you wanted to participate in the mermaid lessons, you had to pay 20 Australian dollars per child. And for example, the mermaid lessons are, if you look at their social media, it's all over the social media that, there's all these mermaids in the pool, they're swimming around, they're teaching your kids how to swim like a mermaid, when in fact there were probably 30 kids enrolled in this mermaid lesson. They had to do 3 separate classes, so you had to wait around. You were paying $20 per child. The children had to do some stretching with some random person. And then when it was their turn, they put on a mermaid tail that was ripped, dirty, moldy, gross. And there was one mermaid who was in the pool who said, "Okay, swim across the pool." And that was the lesson. They then brought out a hoop that the girls had to swim through. But it just it looks beautiful on the packaging, and when you live it, it just was not what I was expecting. Having said that, the mermaid lessons were the highlight of my children's lives probably, so maybe my expectations of what they would be are just too high. But let me talk to some specific points. There were lots of things to pay for, so a lot of kids club activities had a cost. Bracelet making cost another $5, for example. We couldn't order a meal or a drink for our nanny, which has never been a problem at any other hotel. Usually she would order something from the room service menu kind of when we went out for dinner once the kids were asleep, but they made us pay for those or any drinks that a nanny would have. The rule for the beverage package is that there are no drinks before 11 a.m. And that includes juices, that includes coconuts, that includes anything. So basically, if you're up early with kids by the pool and you've had your brekkie, there's just nothing else that you can order in that time. At Melia, we absolutely were ordering fruit smoothies, we were having a coconut, we were ordering sparkling water, we were living the all-inclusive life, and that was really firm at Grand Mirage that there was no service available before 11 o'clock. And having said that, the coconuts, which was the one thing that I think really feels special about ordering from a pool bar, I would say at least 3 out of the 9 days there were no coconuts available. Just ran out. Which just, I feel on an island of Bali, especially when you're paying quite a lot of money, to just not have coconuts, they were really too bad. I also found the quality of the food and drink to be average at best. Now, if you haven't been to Bali in recent years, the quality of the food and drink is exceptional. It is equivalent to, if not better than, a lot of the restaurants in Perth, in a lot of the places that we've stayed or restaurants we've been to previously. The food and drink at Grand Mirage was average at best. The Indian dinner we enjoyed. The rest of the kind of buffet or the main meals at the pool or the main meals at the main kind of restaurants, I think there are 8 restaurants, which sounds fancy. They were all the same. They were just boring, kind of fine, but certainly not a really enjoyable kind of experience. For example, I ordered a mojito on the first day when we got there, and they just kind of poured some spirits and some soda water into. There was no cocktail shakers. There was nothing. Nobody seemed to have any kind of skill or training in making drinks. They were all tasted and looked the same. There's nothing special about it, which I think I'm just too old to not drink fancy cocktails. I want them to be nice. The beers were hot. The sparkling water that they had was only a Fanta water, which came out of a plastic bottle. When we were at Melia, there was sparkling water and still water in glass bottles every time we sat down to eat or drink. There were options for iced lattes by the pool. You could order any kind of juice or any kind of smoothie that you would like. There was just so much more. Each restaurant had a fancy, signature cocktail. It just felt really special, and this felt meh. On top of that, one of the things I think I found the most difficult was the quality of the service at this hotel. And now I'm really clear, I know that, there are hotels in Bali where the service is not necessarily their focus. But I have stayed in some beautiful hotels that have had lovely service, and at Mirage it just did not live up to hype. I would say 90% of staff at Grand Mirage had a trainee label on their badge, and from what we learned, the trainees don't get paid at least for 6 months to a year. And I'm absolutely fine with hotels having trainees, but these trainees were completely unsupervised. There was a big number that didn't speak English, who were really overwhelmed by ordering, who couldn't understand kind of when you needed something different or when you were even trying to order water. There was one day I was just trying to order a bottle of water and I was trying to point to it on the menu and write it down for him, and he just really was struggling, and I really felt for him and a lot of the trainees actually in some of those experiences, because they don't know what they're doing. There's no support. There doesn't seem to be anybody running the pool bars or the restaurants. There really seem to be very few staff in charge. I tried to order ice cream in a bowl instead of a cone, and it was just the biggest rigmarole to try and understand, and I really didn't have confidence in the things that we were asking for from them. And that is very different to experiences we've had in Bali, really at any of the hotels. Most of the time the staff remember you, they learn your name, they know where you like to sit or the types of food that you like to order. They might suggest your favorite drink if you haven't had it for a while. Like, just a really nice relationship. And this just felt like everybody was scrambling all the time. It was really hard to order a drink by the pool. It was really hard to order food. I didn't love the feeling or the way, guests absolutely did not feel special or important at this hotel. There was also, I really struggled with the communication. We did not know where to go, what was on. There was a bird show that we completely missed because it wasn't signposted anywhere. There was no information around the pool as to when things were coming up. There was a movie night that we didn't know about, and then we showed up the next night for a movie night and there wasn't one on that night. There was advertised to be lots of PlayStation games in the gaming room and there weren't any. It was really odd. And again, not what it looks like on social media. So I think that was really tricky for us. We had these really high expectations. I realise I'm getting quite whingy at this point, but I also want to be really clear for those of you who are considering somewhere like this, the sorts of things that kind of happened. The Kids Club was really disappointing at Grand Mirage. We actually spent almost no time in the Kids Club because it wasn't welcoming. The people in there were not interested in getting to know kids or welcoming them into the space. Our kids did go there with our nanny or babysitter once, and she just said, it feels really yuck in there. We're probably not going to go back. The Kids Club opens into the main area, but also opens into the splash park area with no gate. And I did not feel like there was enough organisation or structure that a kid couldn't just walk out of the kind of play area and just walk into the splash park. I saw kids opening the gate themselves and just leaving, and nobody seemed to know what was going on. The check-in process was really confusing. It was just a bit dirty and it did not feel nice. In previous hotels, we have very rarely had the kids just in Kids Club by themselves. They've either been kind of with the nanny doing one of the activities or kind of, watching a movie or playing games, but there was nothing organised. There's nothing really fun to do, and so our kids it didn't seem like it was pitched at the right age for anybody for it to make sense for us to send them there, so we didn't do that. They had an area set up for movies, which, as I said, we saw one movie that was set up on the projector. Again, really unclear as to when they were, what time they were, what movie was showing. The last of my... Actually, no, two more issues I had. The ice cream was really, really bad. They have an ice cream by the pool. The cones were absolutely... they look like they'd been shaken around in the box a million times. The ice cream was incredibly icy. I did not have a single ice cream by the pool, and last year at Melia I had at least one every day. And so that tells you kind of just the difference in quality. If I was to use a marker, the ice cream would be the actual example. The other thing that I found tricky was they did have some really cool ideas for shows. So they had a fire show, which my kids went to. We had dinner, like a buffet dinner, and watched the show, and they loved that. The show was incredible. I thought that was really well done, but it did not start until 7:45, and I'm not sure about how many families are in Bali and what time everybody's eating, but my kids were cooked. They had spent the day in the pool to even just kind of wait until that time to even be starting dinner, to be watching the show. And that was every night, every event. The doors didn't open until 7, and then you had to kind of wait for the pre-show, and then the main show would come on later. And everyone was exhausted. It was just too late for a family kind of hotel. I thought, but maybe we're just have children who go to bed at around that time. So that might have just been me. I found the rest of the restaurants average, and that's probably enough of me whinging about it. As for the kids' activities, like if you do have a holiday booked to the Grand Mirage, I have no doubt your children will love it. There was so much great stuff for them to do. My kids adored it. They adored the space, the pool, all of the things. They really liked the food that they had. They didn't love any of the desserts, they've told me, but the main courses kind of had a selection of, kids' faves. There was a spaghetti pomodoro, spaghetti bolognese, a kids' burger. They had some different... I can't even remember the rest of them, but they were really happy with that. So overall, I think the kids had a brilliant time. There were lots of questions when I spoke about Bali about sickness and Bali belly, and we were lucky enough to not experience that this time again. Maybe we were lucky. I think a lot of the top hotels now are very, very careful about food safety. I didn't necessarily see this at the buffet where we were, but I think it's in hotels' best interest, particularly if you're eating and drinking in the hotel in something like an all-inclusive, to really take that extra step. We confidently had ice in our drinks. We confidently ate salad that was part of the hotel, confident that had been washed in purified water. We did take probiotics before we left. I was probably a little bit lax with that as to what I would have been last time. I took a traveller's probiotic, so I felt fine. There is a new product called Travelan, which a lot of people have been raving about online. It is a tablet that you take before eating every time you eat, and it significantly reduces, I think it's E. coli and salmonella poisoning as a result. So that is absolutely something that you could consider. For my children and the water, we had a couple of run-ins where we accidentally ran the tap at teeth brushing time and they washed their toothbrush or had a little sip of it. So we tied a little ribbon around the top of the tap to kind of remind everybody not to drink from it. It happened a couple of times, but in the scheme of things was very small amounts. We tended to have a shower rather than a bath. And so when we were in there with them, we were just reminding them not to open their mouth and drink the water in there. One of the greatest things we did is get their hair braided on the second day that we were there, and not in the big braids, not in the extensions, just in the really traditional Balinese braids that you used to get in the 80s and 90s if you ever went then. It kept their hair off their face. It meant that we didn't have to properly wash it, condition it and brush it every night. And so really the showers were very tokenistic. I reckon 30 seconds in that shower. So that also limited the amount of water that they ate. Otherwise, we had no limitations on kind of what they could eat. So a lot of people had questions about fussy eaters. My children are kind of typically developing eaters. They have definite preferences, definite fussy periods. They ate really well in Bali. I did notice a big progression this year with all the kids ordering kind of more adult style meals. In past years, we've had a lot of spaghetti with the sauce on the side, but this year they were more confident in ordering from the menu. And one of the things I love about all inclusive is just the mental load that you can put aside around, do you want that? Great. You don't like that? Order something else. I don't mind. Have whatever you like. So I think that was really helpful for us. They chose what they wanted almost entirely at the breakfast buffet. There was a kids station that had lollies and things, which seems a little unnecessary for brekkie, but they absolutely frothed over that, had a great time, but also confidently chose scrambled eggs and toast and were interested in buttering their own toast and doing those own things. So they had a great time at kind of all the meals. As I said, I'm not a fussy eater. I really like nice food, and I found the food kind of boring, but I guess it depends what you're interested in. From an allergy point of view, if your child or anyone in your family has food allergies, all of the kind of more upmarket restaurants in Bali, so in places like Nusa Dua or Seminyak, they are very capable of catering to allergies, to gluten-free diets, to food preferences. I think it would be trickier in the buffet kind of selection. There is definitely gluten-free toast, but there is not necessarily a gluten-free toaster. So I think contamination would be a big risk. And I think people would probably feel more comfortable ordering from a menu than just taking from a buffet. But in general, they are very supportive and kind of educated across the board about food allergy, so it's probably not a huge concern as perhaps it would have been maybe 10 years ago. I also appreciate that I'm saying that as a person who doesn't have a child with a food allergy. So I've noticed it on the menus. I've noticed I've been with families who do have gluten-free requirements, and it has been well handled. The next question was about activities to do outside the hotel. I'm not well placed to comment on this because we actually did not leave the hotel this time other than to go and get a massage and to go and get a pedicure. I loved every second of those outdoor activities, but we had tickets to go to the Trans Studio indoor theme park, but we just could not be bothered sorting out a car, transport, getting there. We all wanted a holiday of just doing very little, and our kids were so happy in the hotel that we didn't. I can appreciate that for some families that is like an absolute nightmare, but for us at this point in our lives, it worked so well. As I said, we didn't go to Waterbomb this time, although we did previously, and I loved it. The other thing I love is Ayu, our nanny. We have used her now for maybe 4 times, and she brought along her sister-in-law who looked after the other family had a new baby, so she helped look after the 7-month-old while you looked after the 4 kids. And we know her, we trust her. She looks after our children from about 3 until we get back from dinner usually. So the way that we've done it in the past is she comes at 3, we get them started with some kind of activity, so we don't let them swim in the big pool with her. I just don't think that's fair for her to have to supervise 4 children in a pool, but she did take them to the splash park area of the hotel where she could supervise them all. There's a little playground and a trampoline, and they played chasey on this small playground for hours and loved that. She took them down for marshmallow toasting on the beach with the hotel had set that up, and so she kind of supervised them. My oldest was outraged that there was a very limited supply of marshmallows and you were only allowed 1, which, coming back to my theme, was not the case at Milia, so even the kids noticed it. So yeah, that was a really helpful start. We would generally go for a massage at that time, and then we would go maybe to the adults only pool or have a little drink and then come back and sort them out for dinner. So we'd order their dinner, whether it was by the pool or in the room, get them kind of showered and ready for bed, and then we would leave and go out for dinner, and she would kind of read them a story or play a little game, and then all the girls would go to bed in our bunk beds, and then when we came back from dinner, our nanny would go home and we would move the 2 visiting kids from whichever room back into their room. I trust this lady with my children's life. She's amazing. We've known her for a number of years now. She is gentle and genuine and not pushy and really works hard to build a relationship with them all. They feel really safe and secure with her. She speaks excellent English. She reads funny books according to them. She has lots of ideas and games and fun ways of doing things. So our kids ranged from 4 to 8 and they all loved her, and I know she has a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old boy herself, so she's also very well equipped with families from different ages, and I'm more than happy to share her details. She's happy for me to share her details. If you would like that, you can send me an email or a DM on Instagram. And the final question was about Fiji versus Bali. I think the answer to this really depends on where you live. For us to fly to Fiji from Perth is an absolute nightmare. I've been once, did not love it. Will not go back. It was absolutely not worth the effort, whereas there's a likelihood we will go back to Bali next year because it is just so easy. Obviously, if you're on the East Coast, those things might be easier, cheaper, more accessible. You might know some of the better spots, but for me, Fiji is not it. All right, is there anything else I wanted to talk about? I think my main summary is we still had a lovely time. Like, I want to be really clear. It's not a whinge fest. We had a great time, had a lovely time with our friends. The kids had an absolute ball. We felt relaxed. I think our expectations, particularly what we'd seen online, were high, and they definitely weren't met in the way that they were at previous hotels. This time we paid more and I feel like we got less. I feel like it said all inclusive, but it wasn't, and you were kind of treated a little bit like you were taking too much, or when really we were taking very little. They are my thoughts on Bali. Remember that there are 2 episodes previously you can go and listen to if you want to hear more about my thoughts. Otherwise, I hope that gave you an insight into where we stayed. I have been recommended the Padma, the Dynasty, kind of those 2 old goodies from the 90s if you ever went to Bali with your family. I've heard that the Trans Hotel in Seminyak is really nice. People have spoken about Novotel in Nusa Dua and the Grand Hyatt in Nusa Dua, so those are 2 other options. And actually Mulia, a few people have talked about Mulia, which is not Melia. Is slightly different. So they are some options for you to consider. I probably wouldn't put my name behind the Grand Mirage, so there goes any sponsorship deals. But so be it. Love Bali. I hope this has given you some confidence to travel there if you have that on your bucket list. And thank you for being here. Thanks for listening.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.